Welcome, everyone. Today, we're diving into one of the most pivotal moments in modern history, the Russo Japanese War of 1904-1905. Why is this war so important? Well, this was the first time in modern history that an Asian power defeated a major European empire in a full-scale war. It shattered stereotypes, reshaped global geopolitics, and inspired anti-imperial movements across the world. So, grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and let's break this down: what caused the war, how it unfolded, and why it mattered. And trust me, this is not just about battles. It's about ambition, strategy, and the world waking up to a new balance of power. To understand why Russia and Japan went to war, we need to look at what was happening in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. This was the age of imperialism. European powers were carving up Africa and Asia, and Japan, after centuries of isolation, had recently emerged as a modernized, ambitious nation. Japan's transformation began in the 1860s with the Meiji Restoration. Within just a few decades, they modernized their military, economy, and government, and they were ready to play in the big leagues of global politics. Now, Russia, on the other hand, was a massive empire but struggling with internal issues. The country was modernizing slower than other European powers, and Tsar Nicholas II was desperate for a foreign victory to unify his people and distract them from domestic unrest. Both Russia and Japan had their eyes on the same prize: control over Korea and Manchuria. Korea was seen as the dagger pointing at Japan's heart, while Manchuria was rich in resources like coal and iron. Negotiations over these territories fell apart, and tensions boiled over. By early 1904, war was inevitable. The war kicked off dramatically. In February 1904, Japan launched a surprise attack on the Russian fleet at Port Arthur without a formal declaration of war. Sound familiar? Yes, Japan was already demonstrating its mastery of calculated, bold strikes, a tactic they'd used decades later at Pearl Harbor. The attack caught Russia off guard and set the tone for the war. Japan followed up with a series of naval and ground campaigns, taking advantage of their superior preparation and strategy. One key moment was the Battle of the Yellow Sea, where Japan's navy, led by Admiral Tug Haihachiro, dominated Russia's fleet. Japan's naval prowess was a game-changer. They showed that a smaller, well-trained, and technologically advanced force could take on a giant like Russia. On land, the Japanese army marched into Korea and Manchuria. They were well-organized, disciplined, and had shorter supply lines compared to the Russians, who were fighting far from home. Logistics were a nightmare for Russia. Imagine moving troops and supplies thousands of miles across Siberia by train while your enemy is right next door. Let's talk about the major turning points. One of the bloodiest battles was at Mukden in early 1905. This was one of the largest land battles in history at the time, with hundreds of thousands of troops on both sides. The Japanese outmaneuvered the Russians and secured a decisive victory. But the most dramatic moment came at sea, the Battle of Tsushima in May 1905. This was the grand finale of the war. Russia sent its Baltic fleet on a 19,000-mile journey to reinforce its Pacific forces. That's right, 19,000 miles. When they finally arrived, they were exhausted, poorly coordinated, and no match for Japan's fresh, well-prepared navy. Admiral Tog's fleet annihilated the Russians in what is considered one of the greatest naval battles in history. Out of 38 Russian ships, only a few escaped. This was a humiliating defeat for Russia and sealed Japan's victory. By mid-1905, both sides were exhausted, and international pressure mounted for peace. U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt stepped in as a mediator, and the Treaty of Portsmouth was signed in September 1905. Japan got control over Korea, parts of Manchuria, and the lease of Port Arthur. Russia retained much of its territory but lost influence in East Asia for Japan. This was a huge win. It solidified their position as a major power. And for Russia, the defeat exposed their weaknesses and fueled unrest back home. Just 2 years later, in 1907, the Russian Revolution began brewing. So, Why does this war matter? First, it marked the rise of Japan as a global power. For the first time, a non-European nation had defeated a European empire in modern warfare. This was a turning point for global perceptions of power. Second, it inspired other nations under colonial rule. Leaders in places like India and Africa saw Japan's victory as proof that European domination was not invincible. Finally, it set the stage for future conflicts. Japan's victory gave them confidence but also a sense of entitlement. This would contribute to their imperial ambitions in the decades to come, leading to tensions in the Pacific and eventually World War II. So, that's the story of the Russo Japanese War, a clash of empires that changed the world. It's a reminder of how quickly the balance of power can shift and how ambition and strategy can redefine history. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history, hit that like button, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what topic you'd like me to cover next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.